Hey guys, welcome to Zeke's Stories. And this video is about the Black Death Plague, one of the most deadly plagues that happened in 1347. It was even worse than the COVID-19 pandemic we went through. Even I was shocked while doing the research for this, realizing how severe it really was. So come with me and let's uncover together where this terrifying plague began. The story begins in Central Asia, somewhere in the vast steppes where traders traveled along the Silk Road. The plague had been lurking there for years, living quietly in communities of rodents. But in the 1340s, something changed. The disease found its way to humans, and once it did, there was no stopping it. Merchant ships became the carriers of doom. In October 1347, 12 ships docked at the port of Messina in Sicily. The sailors on board were either dead or dying. Those who still lived were covered in mysterious black swellings that oozed blood and pus. The authorities ordered the ships away immediately, but it was already too late. The plague had arrived in Europe. The Black Death moved faster than anyone could imagine. From Sicily, it spread to all major Mediterranean ports within months. Marseille fell in November 1347. By January 1348, it reached southern France and Spain. The disease traveled along trade routes, following merchants, pilgrims, and soldiers. Rivers became highways for death. Cities became death traps. What made this plague so deadly was how it spread. We now know it was caused by a bacterium called Yersinia pestis, carried by fleas that lived on black rats. These rats were everywhere in medieval Europe. They lived in homes, in grain stores, in ships. When an infected flea bit a human, the bacteria entered the bloodstream and began to multiply. But people in medieval times had no idea about bacteria or fleas. They could only watch in horror as the disease consumed their world. Some blamed bad air, others blamed the position of planets, and many believed it was God's punishment for human sins. Imagine waking up one morning feeling feverish. Your head pounds, your body aches. You think maybe you caught a cold. But then you notice something terrifying. A swelling in your armpit or groin, the size of an egg, or even an apple. The swelling, called a bubo, gives the disease its other name, bubonic plague. These buboes were incredibly painful. They turned black or purple, which is why people called it the Black Death. Within days, the infected person would develop more symptoms: high fever, chills, vomiting, diarrhea, and terrible pain. Black spots appeared on the skin from internal bleeding. Many victims died within 3 to 5 days of showing the first symptoms. There was also a more deadly form called pneumonic plague. This one attacked the lungs and could spread directly from person to person through coughing. If you caught this version, you were almost certainly dead within 2 days. Survivors were extremely rare. The speed and scale of death was beyond anything Europe had ever seen. In some villages, everyone died. In cities, bodies piled up faster than people could bury them. Families who woke up healthy in the morning could be dead by evening. Parents watched their children die. Children were orphaned by the dozens. The social order collapsed. Priests who went to give last rites to the dying caught the plague themselves. Doctors fled. Entire monasteries were wiped out. In some places, so many people died that there was no one left to harvest crops or tend animals. Fields went empty. Livestock wandered free. Giovanni Boccaccio, an Italian writer who lived through the plague in Florence, described streets empty of everyone except the dead and dying. He wrote about how fear broke all human bonds. Fathers abandoned sick children. Wives left dying husbands. The basic rules of civilization crumbled under the weight of terror. People tried everything to stop the plague. They prayed, they fasted, they held processions carrying holy relics. Some turned to extreme measures like self-flagellation, whipping themselves bloody in hopes of appeasing God's anger. Nothing worked. The death toll kept rising. When people are scared and desperate, they often look for someone to blame. During the Black Death, this led to terrible violence. Jewish communities became scapegoats. False rumors spread that Jews had poisoned wells to cause the plague. In reality, Jewish communities died from the plague just like everyone else, sometimes at even higher rates because they lived in crowded ghettos. But facts did not matter to terrified mobs. Across Europe, thousands of Jews were murdered. Entire communities were burned alive. In Strasbourg, 2,000 Jews were killed in a single day in February 1349. This tragedy shows us how disease can bring out the worst in humanity. Others blamed beggars, foreigners, or lepers. Some thought cats and dogs spread the disease, so they killed them by the thousands. This actually made things worse because cats helped control the rat population. The statistics of the Black Death are hard to fully grasp. Before the plague, Europe had about 75 million people. By the time the worst was over in 1353, that number had dropped to between 50 and 60 million. That means roughly 25 million Europeans died in less than a decade. But the plague did not affect all places equally. Some areas lost 80% of their population. Mediterranean port cities were hit especially hard. England lost about half its people. Norway lost nearly two-thirds. In Cairo, according to one historian, up to 10,000 people died every day at the peak of the outbreak. Villages disappeared from maps entirely. Farms became forests again. In England alone, over 1,000 villages were abandoned and never resettled. Those who survived found themselves in a completely changed world. There were not enough workers to do all the jobs that needed doing. Suddenly, peasants and laborers had bargaining power they never had before. They demanded higher wages. They refused to work under the old feudal conditions. Lords and nobles tried to stop this by passing laws forcing people to work for pre-plague wages. But these laws were hard to enforce when workers were so scarce. Many peasants simply moved to towns where they could earn more or negotiate better terms. This labor shortage changed European society in fundamental ways. It weakened the feudal system. It gave common people more freedom and better living conditions. Some historians argue that the Black Death actually helped pave the way for the Renaissance and modern Europe. The plague also changed medicine. Doctors realized their old theories were not working. This pushed them to observe symptoms more carefully and try new treatments. Medical schools grew. The idea that disease could be studied and understood began to take root. Many people think the Black Death was a single event, but they would be wrong. The plague kept coming back in waves for the next 400 years. It returned in the 1360s, killing about 20% of those who had survived the first outbreak. London suffered major plague epidemics in 1563, 1593, 1603, 1625, and 1665. Each time it returned, it killed fewer people because populations had dropped so much. But the fear remained. Whenever plague appeared in a town, people fled if they could. Quarantine measures were developed. Cities built plague hospitals. Doctors wore beaked masks filled with herbs, thinking bad smells caused disease. The last major outbreak in Western Europe was the Great Plague of London in 1665, which killed about 100,000 people. After that, the plague gradually disappeared from Europe, though we still do not fully understand why. The Black Death teaches us several important lessons. First, it shows how vulnerable we are to disease. No amount of wealth, power, or prayer protected people from the plague. Kings died alongside peasants. Bishops died alongside beggars. Second, it reveals how disease can reshape society. The Black Death changed everything: economics, social structure, religion, art, and culture. The world of 1400 was completely different from the world of 1300. Third, it reminds us how fear can lead to violence and scapegoating. The persecution of Jews during the plague years shows what can happen when panic overrides reason and compassion. Finally, it demonstrates human resilience. Despite losing millions of people, European society rebuilt itself. People found ways to adapt, to survive, and eventually to thrive again. The Black Death remains the deadliest pandemic in human history when measured by the proportion of population killed. It was a catastrophe beyond imagination, a nightmare that haunted Europe for generations. Survivors passed down stories of the plague years that shaped European culture for centuries. Today, we understand what caused the Black Death. We have antibiotics that can treat plague if caught early. We have better sanitation, better understanding of disease transmission, and public health systems designed to stop outbreaks before they become pandemics. But the story of the Black Death is still relevant. It reminds us that invisible threats can change the world overnight. It shows us the importance of scientific understanding over superstition. It warns us about the dangers of blaming others during times of crisis. As we look back across nearly 700 years, we can honor those millions who died by learning from their experience. The Black Death was one of humanity's darkest hours, but we survived it. We learned from it, and we became more prepared for the challenges that would come after. That, perhaps, is the ultimate lesson. Even in our darkest moments, we have the capacity to endure, adapt, and build something better from the ashes of tragedy.